Ever wondered what it truly takes to succeed in specific jobs around Signature? Well, you're about to find out. From software engineering to talent acquisition, we're here to spotlight real-life paths to success. Welcome to On the Job With, your window into career pathing and discovering what it takes to excel in roles all around our organization. Your host and Signature Edge producer Addison is diving deep into the heart of career exploration and hearing personal experiences from people's journeys to career excellence. You can only know what's possible when you hear what the job really is directly from those getting it done. So, if you're ready to focus on career pathing and discover the steps that led our guests to where they are now, buckle up and tune in to On the Job With.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to On the Job With. I'm super excited to be here with another new episode. Today, joined by Erin Elkins. Erin, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Addison. How are you?
I'm doing great today. I'm super excited to talk to you. Could you introduce yourself a little bit more to the company?
My name is Erin Elkins. My title is Manager of Contracts, Risk, and Compliance. And I have been with Signature now going almost at 3 years. It's flown by.
Congratulations on 3 years. You actually were somebody I was very excited to have on the podcast. For anybody maybe unfamiliar with the inner workings of Signature, I think your role in compliance, contracts, and risk management are very integral to how we actually get the work we're contracted to do done. Could you speak a little bit more about what your role is to those who might be unfamiliar?
The contracts and compliance, we are under the corporate umbrella of compliance. So our contracts team, the main role is really to be the point of contact between our customers and Signature on contractual matters. So our contracts team works to make sure that what's outlined in our contracts we are following, that everybody understands and is on the same page with what we're required to do, reporting out on progress on our contractual activities, capturing any changes needed to the contract, and overall just being that relationship point of contact to ensure that everybody's on the same page about what we're to deliver when and problem solve through any issues that arise during the contract.
It seems like you have a lot of facets to your position. Knowing that you're beholden both to contract guidelines and to stakeholders inside and outside the company, could you explain a little bit more to our audience what your day-to-day job looks like?
So I would say a typical day in my role is not typical. It very much is, it can be cyclical. So if we have a contract that needs to be renewed every 3 months, well, when it gets closer to the end of that 3 months, then I'm working, to get that executed. Some of our contracts, the majority of our contracts run on an option year or a year schedule. So it's not something where every day you're working to extend that contract, but there are 3 contracts folks at Signature. Penny Ilders is our director of contracts administration, and Vanessa McCormick is a contracts manager alongside Penny and I in the team as well. We each have a number of agreements that we manage, and so every day I check in with these folks and see how things are going. Some contracts are renewed, on a quarterly basis, but the majority are on a yearly basis. And so we're working through any kind of modifications. We're working through any issues that have come up or happen to land in our inbox about, how do we problem solve through this, or we need this documented. We're also currently working with business owners to execute independent contractor agreements for folks that we want to bring on board to do specialty work. Or we are then often involved in meetings with business development on new projects that they're looking into and what information we need to supply. It's always good for the contracts folks to be in on those discussions from the beginning so that when we go the team builds our proposal and they want to submit it, that we have the contracts perspective to know that we've included everything and it's good to go. So I would say a typical day is a combination of new contracts, bids and proposal work, working through problems that might arise, working with our finance and accounting teams really closely to make sure that we have everything documented and any changes that are happening, we have that in our accounting system. It could be in my current situation, it could be, really spending time with teams across Signature to figure out what they need for our OnSpring software. Yeah, going back to what I said before, a typical day is, there is no typical. It comprises a lot of different projects and aspects, and working with different groups across Signature. And that's really fun. That's really one of the best parts of my role, is really getting to work with so many different groups across Signature.
It sounds like you never have a dull day.
No.
What really struck me is you mentioned nobody grows up thinking they want to be compliance contract manager. Could you tell me a little bit more about your work history and how you became somebody that would be in a position to be a contracts manager in compliance? What was your work history like? How did you transition to being somebody that would oversee a contract? What did that career path or evolution look like?
So that is a great question. And I've been asked this question before, like, why contracts and how did that happen? And honestly, it was very interesting. I had been a director, a VP of nonprofit programs for a long time. And so I had interaction with contracts and reading contracts, but really in my role at the state of Colorado many years ago, I was asked to manage this large vendor contract and manage the vendor. And long story short, there were a lot of things not going well. And the contract for a multi-million dollar payment to this vendor every year was 9 pages. And I just couldn't believe it. And I was like, well, we need them to do this. Well, there's nothing in this contract that says that they have to do this. There's nothing in this contract that says what we are looking for them to do. And so I just started documenting, and the end result was a 82-page contract for renewal, because I was like, well, this is unacceptable. And, we see that a lot in our role with the VA, but it's like, this is taxpayer money, and we need to have something that we can hold people accountable with, or so that everybody understands what they're supposed to be doing. And so, yeah, I just sort of fell in love with contracts, and ever since have seen it very much as, like I alluded to earlier, it's a tool. It's not a piece of paper with writing on it. It's a tool to have a shared understanding, to hold each other accountable. And especially when you have staffing changes and you have different people going in and out and changing roles, it's that one constant to come back to and say, okay, but here's what it says. So how do we make this work? Going through Emerging Leaders several years ago, I can't remember who said it, but they said, just stay curious. And I'm like, that has been my nickname since I was like a toddler, is I'm just always like, well, what's that? And why is that? And I just always stay very, very curious. And I was so glad to hear somebody else finally say that was one of their keys to success. So I definitely have areas where I spend more time and have more expertise. But being that curious person has allowed me to gain more expertise in areas that I wouldn't have otherwise. And it's really been something that I've embraced. And just at first I was like, oh, I need to not be so curious because it leads me down all these other paths. But it's still the end goal in mind. You're still trying to figure out what's going on with this thing so that the end goal of having the successful partnership works.
It sounds like you really unlocked your superpower with that position. A 9-fold increase just in the length of a contract from your involvement sounds like you found your niche, to be honest. I don't know if you saw it coming, but then found that contract, and
I
here we
didn't.
are. Here we are. But now that you're here at your role in Signature, could you maybe take a little time to explain what success looks like to you in your current position?
So defining success in the contracts and compliance can be a couple different ways. My role really combines internal customer service and external customer service. So externally, working with our clients and customers to ensure that they see Signature as a skilled, reliable, flexible partner that's there to meet the needs that they have. And so really being that point of contact and working through any issues or questions that come up. Um, Internally, I would define success as people knowing that they can come to us with questions. We are partnering with our business owners or our data team or anybody that plays a role in terms of the contract deliverables coming to fruition. So whether it's working with our business development team to win new business, negotiate some of the terms on an initial contract that works for everybody. I think I determined success, and success looks like being that go-to partner, both internally and externally.
What really stuck out to me in that response, Aaron, actually, is when you mentioned defining one factor for defining when you mentioned one factor for defining success was having our associates be comfortable enough to approach compliance if they needed to talk about anything. I just want to take some time to shout out the compliance department. Working with you guys on the experience team for some of our communications and compliance week sort of events, I will tell you the compliance team really does put themselves out there to be a partner for what our associates do in everything across the company, just to make sure we're putting compliance first. Making sure that compliance is an active partner with our associates. Do you have an anecdote or anything you'd feel comfortable talking about where you've recently worked with an associate or a client to solve a problem or accomplish a goal?
There's so many questions that come up daily, and that's why we have multiple different ways, and we try to get our name out there to say, let us know what your question is. It's better to have a question. I try to tell people, sometimes people see compliance or your contracts folks as you can do this, you can't do this. And really what we want to be is the partner who you can come to and you can say, this is what I want to do. How do I do it within the framework that we're allowed to work within? We're not the no people. We are the, how can we help you get where you're going within the requirements that, whether it's HIPAA, whether it's data security, all these different things. We want to answer those questions, and be approachable. It's so much better to work together rather than an auditor come and discover something for the first time. And then we've got to backtrack and figure it out. Like, we're on the same team. So let's figure out how to be successful together first.
In the current situation you're in, a lot of growth and education has to go into that. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about how previous jobs have contributed to your approach to your work and your work ethic? Was there a turning point that shaped your path to lead you to Signature?
My career path has been a little bit interesting. I don't think anyone grows up and says, hey, I want to be a contracts manager. You end up falling into it. And yes, I'm a little bit odd, but you end up sort of falling in love with it because of the things it allows you to do. It's such a central part of executing a successful program. And so in that sense, but the majority of my beginning career was in nonprofits, working with people with disabilities, working in government healthcare programs. And so through working with the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing here in Colorado, and we administered CHIP and Medicaid, I took over a large vendor contract, the largest of the department, and just fell in love with it. And it really I was able to see how negotiating those contract terms, managing the performance of the contract, all of those things had a direct impact on services and benefits that members were receiving. That might sound a little odd, like how does that translate into people getting care? But one of the things, for example, that we had to do was the state or Medicare or an entity said, hey, you're now required to offer this service. It was really our job then to ensure that they understood how to administer the program. All of that was documented within the contract. If they weren't performing in the way that they were supposed to, there were clauses in the contract that we could rely on to say, this is what you're required to do. All of that was able to be used ultimately for people to get the services that they were entitled to and we were trying to provide. So a few years ago, after working in government programs and healthcare, I decided to take a position in aerospace contracts. And I found I really wasn't energized by my work. Of course, I was motivated, but not in the way that I had before. And it really was, no offense to those in the aerospace industry, but it wasn't my passion. It wasn't my, I couldn't find that direct tie back to how it really was helping people. So I left that position and thankfully made my way to Signature, back in the healthcare space of being energized and fulfilled and just motivated to do my best work.
It looks like you're, beginning in this nonprofit role with helping people that may have disabilities really sort of let you know what you did want to do. Work in aerospace that wasn't really driving you, coming back to something like Signature where our mission is to improve healthcare administration and make healthcare easier for those trying to receive it. I really want to ask you, it sounds like you have a pretty strong sense of self in what you want to do for a position. Could you maybe talk about a little bit more about how you know that is a perfect fit for your work?
It's a very interesting question, Essen, because sometimes when people think of contracts or compliance, they think of like reading a contract, very dry, very boring. But really, for me, I enjoy meeting people's needs, answering questions, relaying information. I get that in my job with contracts. It's always changing. So you're always communicating back and forth very both internally and externally. It's challenging. There's always things that come up that are not going to be documented into a contract. And you really have to work through with the partner. Either the business owner comes to you and says, hey, we've been asked to do this. It's not in our contract. How can we make sure that we're covered? Or the customer comes to us and says, hey, we're having an issue with this, and we work through it. And so my sense of self is really, and you can see it in my strengths, I can't run from it, not that I would, but is building relationships, relating to people, communicating, and really being a good partner in solving problems to get to the final solution. So I think actually it works well with who I am and really at my core, what makes me happy.
I loved that you mentioned your strengths. As a strengths-based organization, I have to ask you to please list your strengths for those listening at home.
My first strength is woo, then responsibility, positivity, adaptability, and relator. And none of those were very surprising to me. Woo is very misconstrued, I feel, that people are like, oh, you like to plan parties. That's not what woo is. So please don't ask me to.
I feel like woo is a very rare strength. So to even have it as your number one, I find is very, very interesting. But I completely understand with that winning others over sort of definition that woo has, that when the work I've done with you, Aaron, I can see that. Moving on to my next question, you had mentioned a little bit about seeing the industry change over the course of your career. Could you talk a little bit more about how your understanding of success has changed while you've been in the role or throughout your career?
That's a Great question. I think in the beginning of my career, success was very strictly defined standards, rules, deliverables. Your contract was a legal document set in stone, and that was that. There was no room for interpretation. And over time, I've learned that's not the case. Contracts can be amended, questions can be asked. The relationships part is so key because as much as and as defined as you want to make some language in a contract, you might read it and think it means one thing. I might read it and think it's another thing. The relationship and building the communication with the client is to really say, what are you trying to get to? I'm interpreting it to say this. Maybe we should reframe it to say this. And it's really a discussion so that there's no miscommunication about I think this means this. Well, that's not what it says. So really you're having that discussion. What do you need? How can Signature partner with you to make that a reality? And then making sure that you're all on the same page. And so the relationship piece of contracts, and it really is this living, breathing document. Do we need to amend it so that everybody's clear? I would say relationships are better when the expectations are clear. You know, we talk about that when you have your management styles of it's hard for people to be successful when they don't understand, you know, what their expectations and requirements are. And it's the same thing in business relationships. A relationship with the other party allows you to not have it be adversarial. It's just a tool for us to partner and be successful.
I think that is great insights, especially for anybody that might be interested in pursuing a career like yours. That comment on not being adversarial. Again, contracts are a great way to set boundaries. Everybody knows their expectations. You said a relationship can actually be made better by knowing what your expectations are and knowing. We in my neck of the woods, we use the term swim lanes all the time,
Yep.
but knowing what your swim lanes are, I think stuff like that is pretty powerful.
Also, what I've learned is that the role of contracts manager, you are exposed to so many different pieces of the project. You might be involved in how we're reporting the data. Involved meaning you have to have some knowledge of it. So before, also one of the things that's changed is I'm responsible for this document and making sure it gets executed and it being a paper trail and administrative task. And now to really be successful in your role, you need to understand that when you have that conversation with your counterpart and you say, yes, we are in compliance with that, that you truly do understand we're reporting the way we need to, or our staff are getting the background requirements that are required. One of the things I love about the role is you touch every piece of Signature. That's that internal relationship building, right? I've learned how key it really is to have your internal partners as well that can give you the knowledge you need to then relay it back to our customer.
I loved how you sort of redefined again sort of how to be successful in your role. What are your styles of collaboration and teamwork within your role? And what do you find most rewarding about working with others?
My purpose and sort of my mission, and maybe it goes back to that sense of self, but is really problem solving, finding solutions, and meeting your need. I want to be seen as a go-to person. And I love when I came to Signature and that was defined because I was like, that's what I've been doing my whole career is trying to be the go-to person. It goes back to my sense of self, but collaboration for me is I very much come to conversations and projects knowing that I hold one piece of the information and we have very smart, talented people who hold other pieces of information. I'm there to bring my part and to answer the questions or problem solve through the pieces where I can impart some of my wisdom, but really I come to collaboration, and my mindset is we're partnering together to figure out either how to win business or how to kind of navigate a bump in the road or how to demonstrate this is what we're doing, whether that's internally or externally. It's really we're on the same team. We have the same goal. How do we get there?
Yeah, I love that response. And just for anybody listening at home, me and Aaron actually recently attended the DAV Winter Sports Clinic in Snowmass, Colorado, a little bit of a charity event that Signature is proud to sponsor. And I will tell you, working with you in a teamwork situation, Aaron, it was great. We both manned the scanning check-in area for lunches and dinners. Aaron is a team player. Can you share a recent problem or challenge you've been tasked with and describe how you tackled it? Did you have to innovate or adapt to achieve success?
I, through a long and windy road, became the single administrator for our governance, risk, and compliance software that we purchased a few years back. And due to some challenges, we haven't had the chance to, we didn't implement it right away. So I have become the single administrator for configuring the software, rolling it out. Just a little bit of background. So it's contract management software. It will house policies and track audits and several different features across the organization. And so that has been a challenge, and I enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoy configuring the software. So it's always that tug and pull of having responsibilities in, my contracts role and then taking time out to go configure software. So it's amazing. It's such a great opportunity to advance Signature one step further in demonstrating our compliance with some of these things and tying together our capabilities inside of a system. But it does take, again, something that you would think is very straightforward and set in stone. It's purchased software, but it's very configurable and adaptable. And so I really enjoy being able to work with recently, and we're just ending our last sprint of working with the IT security team on configuring it for our external auditors that come in. And how to give them view into and automate our audits process. I enjoy meeting with them and them saying, this is what we need it to do. And then me looking at the out of the box solution, seeing what works, what doesn't, and then going behind the scenes and making it work. That's very enjoyable, but I do have to get creative. And that's also, being able to bring it back then to the team and say, okay, this was your need. Here's what I've configured. And them having such a positive response is really fulfilling.
I think that creativity aspect and something that can be deemed very black and white, I think is a very interesting perspective for people to take. If somebody was to end up in a position like yours or go into compliance or maybe see what it takes to have a role like yours, just to know that it's not necessarily all legalese or compliance requirements, I think is very interesting. Similar to what you just said, what impact do you aspire to make within the organization and with the people you directly work with?
I really aspire for my impact to be one where associates can see the unique contributions that contracts and compliance can bring and help propel Signature forward. Overall, just relied on for our expertise that we have because it is unique. Not everybody has it, and we really are there to ensure this is success of everyone. I'm biased, but it is my perspective that, having skilled contracts and compliance associates are really key to being successful with our customers and winning more business and really being seen as a strategic partner.
I think those are all great aspirations. So, as you said, you had this passion for healthcare, or you had this passion for having people receive care and helping improve healthcare for others. How have you seen your role positively affecting the world outside of Signature?
I think that my role is a key part to affecting the world outside of Signature. Healthcare and the people receiving healthcare, that's just one piece of their larger life. It's a key part. So basically, we're assisting our customers so that they can deliver the care directly to get people on the road to being healthy and happy. But if we're successful in executing our contracts and being a good partner to our customers, then that trickle effect goes all the way through the healthcare landscape. Seeing, my role within Signature positively impacts the world outside of Signature, it's actually very simple. It's if we help our customers and execute well what they need from us and what we're contracted to do, and that runs smoothly, we're changing the healthcare landscape as far as the administrative burdens, but we're also allowing our customers to deliver that healthcare and make an impact to their members. It makes a direct impact. It's just sometimes it can be hard to see, but if you've ever been with your own health insurance and trying to file an appeal or trying to understand why something was denied, or even just picking up the phone and trying to call your insurance, it can be incredibly challenging. Basically, we kind of have a saying in contracts that if your name's in the paper, that's not a good thing. Really, within contracts and compliance, we're in the background ensuring things run smoothly. So if you don't hear about us, it's probably a good thing.
I've heard that adage before, and I think that's actually very telling about your industry. If you do everything right, nobody thinks about you at all. So I love that.
Yes.
So coming towards the end of this interview, I guess one of the final questions I want to ask you was, how do you see the industry you're in evolving? And to keep up with it, what are you doing to make sure that you're capable to take on the work coming in the future? How are you future proofing yourself?
The contracts profession is, and I think I alluded to this before, but that it's always changing. But especially being a federal contractor, there are regulation changes constantly. That happened a lot, obviously, during COVID. And as a federal contractor, there was a lot of guidance provided on what you could and couldn't do. And if you needed to be vaccinated, there was just a lot of activity there. But still, on a day-to-day basis, there are, new regulations that come out and that our customers then flow down to us. So it's really important to stay on top of those and understand, as a federal contractor, what we're required to do. One of the things I thought about recently, and after we initially talked to Addison and kind of like what's changing in contracts world, it's very interesting to kind of see the divided government situation, because with federal contracts, you're required on budgets being passed, and the last several funding cycles we've seen this, is there going to be a government, shutdown? And so as a contracts person, there's a lot of different things you need to be tracking and ensuring that, okay, if we do have a government shutdown, what does this mean and what do we need to document? And that's just one example of things that I think are changing, and I wonder if it's going to continue. I hope not, because it's rather stressful for everybody involved. But yeah, there's just lots of new regulations coming out all the time, and really staying on top of those is key.
Well, those are definitely some things to pay attention to as we move forward into the future. I hope it becomes less stressful for you and anybody involved with our compliance department or working on those contracts. I really want to say thank you for joining us today on the Job With. I think some of the insights you gave us have been absolutely fascinating, and I think really key to anybody who might be considering pursuing a career similar to yours, or maybe didn't even know they were interested in careers in contracting.
Thank you, Addison. I appreciate it.
Of course. And I just want to say thank you to the audience for spending another episode with us going on the job with.